Good morning, good afternoon to you, depending upon what part of the country or perhaps what part of the world you're in. Really appreciate everyone joining live today. Before we get into our curriculum for today, I'm not going to spend much time on us, but once again, for those of you that this is your first time, because many of you that are on today have are very familiar with us. But if you're not familiar with us, we do marketing for the industry. We belong to the industry's biggest associations. We're very, very proud members of the associations that we're part of. And our industry is better off when the associations are flourishing. And actually, by the way, I need to change that to 15. We just turned 15 years. I cannot believe how much time has flown by, and really look forward to seeing everyone here next week, or excuse me, next month at ISC West. We do provide digital marketing, and we work with the entire ecosystem. We work with alarm dealers, we work with integrators, guard companies, fire alarm companies. We also work with that of the vendors that support the channel as well. And if we don't know each other, I'm David Morgan, co-founder of SD Marketing. I've been very blessed to speak at many of the industry's biggest events. We've got a column now in Security Business Magazine, and we're huge advocates. This industry has given so much to us, and these webinars, and I think today is, if my memory serves me correct, number 31 or 32. It's a lot of work that goes into these webinars, and it's not just me, it's my team, and it's also a big thanks to our sponsors, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But if we're not connected, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn and keep this conversation going. And of course, when we see each other in industry events, I'd love to spend some time together. Also, a big thanks to Isabella on our team, who reminds each of you of today's discussion and things in that regard. So big thanks to Isabella, and I appreciate everyone being so kind to her as she's reaching out to you. If you'd like to schedule a time for us to discuss as to how we can help you with your marketing, things in that regard, you can take a look at this QR code and schedule a time we can discuss your marketing and proceed from there. So this is really important, by the way. For those of you that were at our Kingpins and Cocktails event this last year at Peppermill, you'll remember, and I know it's hard to see me, but we were like sardines. And these last couple of weeks, I was speaking with many of the individuals that were at our Kingpins and Cocktails event at ISC West. So our second annual is going to be taking place here on Wednesday, March 25th. Please RSVP. I'm going to keep this slide up for another 5-10 seconds. But a big thanks to that of our fellow co-hosts, Seymour Group, WBFA, and the California Alarm Association. A big thanks. We're really excited and looking forward. So last year we had about 500 RSVPs. We announced it maybe 3 weeks before ISC West. We had over 300 people that attended live. I expect this year for us to have well over 1,000. By the way, the event is at Ellis Island Casino and Brewery, and we have a significantly larger area, so we will not be like sardines, because the whole point is for us to have cocktails, we have appetizers there, and for us to have conversations. So I expect well over 1,000 live in attendance. And really quick, a big thanks to that of our sponsors for the event, with Kidda being that of our diamond, Flex Security being that of our platinum, Emergency 24 is our silver sponsor, and we have Alarm Max Bundy Group, Highland Tech, and Telguard as that of our bronze sponsors. If you're interested in sponsorship, and no pressure, but if you're interested, we do have some availability, some limited availability. If you're interested, you can reach out to me and we can talk a little bit more about that in detail. But really look forward to seeing you at ISC West next week. And speaking of ISC West, come by our booth. So our booth is 1039. It's going to be all the way on the left. If you'd like to schedule an appointment in advance, here is a QR code. I'm going to keep moving forward, because I also will be leading 2 sessions. These will not be about marketing. These will be about some of our megatrends in the industry, which is protecting that of our most important critical infrastructure. And we're going to be discussing lessons from that of global threats. And then we're also going to be discussing I have another session that is going to be on that of remote guarding and talking about our go-to-market playbook. So I'll be moderating both of these panels, and super pumped, super excited about that. Feel free to take a snapshot of this, and I'm going to move forward in about 3, 2, 1. And lastly, and then I'm just going to quickly introduce our sponsors. We'll get into today's content. I'm going to pick up the pace here. Is on Security Business Magazine. I've got one over here. I'm not going to grab it right now. This was an interesting one that I wrote. I think I wrote this maybe a month and a half ago. Is when to fire a customer. So I'm not going to tease this too much. But in Security Business Magazine, whether you read it on securityinfowatch.com or in the magazine that you get in the mail in your offices, I'd love your feedback when we're together next month at ISC West. This one is a little controversial here. Would love your feedback. And speaking of feedback, I really appreciate everyone's feedback with that of the new column. So thank you. Really quickly, I'd love to give a big thanks to that of our two sponsors, Recognize and that of NAPCO, for that of today's webinar. And it's really important that they share in our passion and our mission to really educate the industry of the significance of marketing. If you're not familiar with Recognize, by the way, they had a big announcement that was just released. They were acquired by that of Vosker. They will be at booth 2103 with Vosker. If you're not familiar with Recognize, they do outdoor AI-based video surveillance or AI-based intrusion. It is a platform, it's wireless. I'm not going to go into too much detail. Here is a few of the products or solutions within that of their ecosystem. Please, when you see them and NAPCO, and this is what I will ask everyone. I'm not asking for you to reach out to us to help you with marketing, but if you could reach out and let Recognize and NAPCO know that you appreciate their sponsorship of our, that would mean the world to me. And then speaking of NAPCO, so their booth is 1201, or excuse me, 12031. They're going to be in the front, right in the middle. So it'll not be hard to not find them. Okay, I said that wrong, but you know what I meant by that. So as you know, NAPCO's been around since 1969. You can literally almost nearly run your entire business on NAPCO. And as I mentioned, I'm sincerely appreciative. I personally am, and we as a company are sincerely appreciative of them to continue to sponsor our webinar. Okay, I went through an earful. Now let's get into that of today's curriculum. And I want to start off with a quick story. So I have a group, and this was maybe a few months back, that had reached out to us, and they said, Dave, I first of all, I'm kicking myself for not reaching out to you before. What happened was they had their old website, of course. They spent about $15,000 building that of a beautiful, and visually the website's really nice on that of a new website. But what happened was they went from generating 5, 6, 7 leads per month on the average to the first couple of months generating that of now 1 or 2 or 3 leads per month. And it's the challenge with this group is they spent $15,000 to reduce their revenue. And I'm talking about not their overall revenue, because clearly they generate installs. I mean, look, the basis of our industry is word of mouth and referrals, but marketing is here to help augment that and to make sure we're not having the peaks and valleys. And the whole point here is the revenue that was generated as a result of inquiries from the website significantly decreased. And that's my point here. And today we're going to do a deep dive into this. And I'd like to start off with that of an exercise. And I'd like for you, so I will say during today's session, there's going to be 2 times, and they're going to be over these next few minutes where cell phones are required. But while we're going through the rest of today's session, I would ask that you let's pay close attention to things in that regard. So what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to navigate really quickly, pull up your website on your cell phone. And I know some of you may be on your cell phones, so I think Zoom will allow you to multitask dependent upon your the phone that you're on. But pull up your cell phone really quickly, and I'm going to ask you a few questions. And this is more of like a test, and you don't have to share the results with me specifically because we're going to do it anonymously in just a couple minutes. And within the first few seconds, as you pull this up, and by the way, this is important, and don't jump ahead here if you don't mind. I want you to look at it not from the lens. Clearly, each of us have seen our website on our phone multiple times, but I want you to come with a fresh mind and imagine that you're a prospect that's coming to your website for the first time. So question number 1 or test number 1 is, can you see your phone number without that of scrolling? In other words, do you have to scroll to see your phone number? So this should be a pretty, and I want you to rate this as like pass fail, if that makes sense, or like a yes, no. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, do you see your exact service area within the first 5 seconds? Is it very evident to that of prospects as to the geographic service? Perhaps a few of us, on the vendor side, as I'm taking a look at who's here, we serve nationwide. Perhaps some of us are global. On the integrator, on the integrator dealer guard company side, we're going to be, generally speaking, we may be in multiple states, but most of us are going to have a more of that local footprint. So then question number 3 is is there a testimonial or a review or having that social proof with that of a customer within that of your, above or slightly below the fold? And remember, once again, as you're thinking about these, is it a pass fail with each of these? Okay, so first of all, do you have a contact form that's on your homepage? If you do, can you find it? And how many fields? Okay, so if it's 5 fields, if it's more than 5 fields, that's a fail. If number one, if it's there and there's 5 fields or less, that's a pass. And then lastly, can you find a clear call to action? So like a get a quote or call now. So once again, think about the answers to these really quick, and are they pass fail? And now what I'd like to do is I'd like for you to keep your cell phones if you wouldn't mind, please. And I'm going to just quickly, for those of you that have been here before, you know where I'm going with this. And for those of you that this is the first time, this is, I want you, this is a Slido, it's anonymous. I'd like for you, first of all, to scan the QR code with that of your phone. If I can ask everyone to participate, that I would greatly appreciate that. And keep in mind, once again, this is anonymous, number one. Number two, it is it's anonymous, number one, and you want to click the button and then hit submit. So I'm not going to know how you answered this, and I want you to answer these honestly. And the reason being is, as you answer these honestly, this will see as to how you compare versus that of your peers, and that of groups. And keep in mind, we've got a diverse group here as I'm taking a look at everyone. There are some individuals here I don't know, but I appreciate once again everyone being here. So once again, if you can answer this honestly, how did you fare in your website, your website 60-second test that we just did? Is it struggled with 1 to 2 things? Is we passed easily, found everything quickly? Is it failed most of the test or didn't test yet? I'm not sure. So I appreciate everyone answering this honestly. And for those of us that have answered this struggled with 1 to 2 things, you were definitely in the right place. So I'm going to move on to that of the second question. So when was the last time that you updated that of your website? Was it in the last 6 months? Was it 6 to 12 months ago? Was it within the last 1 to 2 years? Or was it over 2 years? And once again, I appreciate everyone being honest here, because keep in mind, no, I don't know how anyone's answering here, if that makes sense. And I'm not obviously sharing who is on today's meeting and things in that regard. Okay, so 2/3 of us is over 2 years, can't remember. Look, I'll actually, uh, I joke about this. I feel as if sometimes we're the, how do you refer to this? The shoemaker with kids that have holy, holes in their shoes. We haven't had a significant update with our website. We are feverishly trying to see if we can have our website significantly updated by that of ISC West. But I appreciate everyone being open and honest here. The big thing is, and I'm glad that at least a quarter of us have done this within the last 6 months, or 1 in 5. So let's take a look. This is our last question. We're going to jump into the curriculum. So what's your biggest website frustration right now? Is it not getting enough traffic, or traffic comes in but no one calls or fills that form? Is it don't know if my website is working, or the website's fine, I'm here to learn? So if we can just answer this, we'll keep this up for another couple of seconds, and then we'll proceed accordingly from there. Okay, so we've got like it's right now it's a diversity between not getting enough traffic. Traffic comes, but no one calls or fills out the form, and don't know if my website is working here. Okay, gotcha. Well, appreciate everyone's honesty. Okay, so I'm going to now, don't know if my website is working. Okay, well, these are going to be, once again, things that we are discussing here. So let me go back here. So when we look over the last, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we've literally just turned 15 years old. And by the way, some of you have sent me direct messages about this, as well as engaged on LinkedIn. And I'm sorry, I have not had a chance to respond to you, but I will respond to each and every single one of you. And I'm very appreciative of that. So what I will say is, over the years, what I've learned across things that I've seen with across that of hundreds of security websites is, remember, we have the attention span that's less than that of a goldfish. What happened 6 years ago, the fact that we've got computers in our pockets or in our purses or what have you, the fact that social media, it's like it's all about instant gratification. It's what's in it for me. As quickly as I can leave even faster. So nearly 9 out of 10 visitors leave without calling when they're confused. Remember, a confused mind is a mind that's not going to buy, is a mind that's not going to move forward. And look, for the most part, most of us are not having e-commerce or selling DIY systems on our website. For the most part, what we're looking to have is we're looking for them to engage with us. And we're going to talk about all the ways that you engage on websites here, generally speaking. And keep in mind, and I actually would almost even say we've got a lot less than six. I mean, we perhaps may have 60 seconds to ultimately to convert them. But these first few seconds are critical because within these first 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 5 seconds is going to determine as to whether I'm going to research more or I'm going to leave. And it's critical. And the thing is, going back to this confused visitor, if it's not evident and clear as to who we are, what we do, what geography do we serve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they leave, what happens? It's a win for our competitors, which means we've lost that lead and they've gained that lead. That's not what we want to be doing. So let's, as we dive a little deeper to that of the visibility test, talking about that of the contact information, there is, I'll say let me say this without tongue twisting myself, there's an invisibility problem in terms of phone numbers. And most security companies that I see, we at the very least they have it, even though it's not large enough and it's not in a contrast color. But the challenge is we want to remove friction. Right now we're talking about like phone numbers and things above the fold. So like from the phone number perspective, we want, what the challenge is, perhaps maybe we have a phone number that's really small and it's in gray text, which means it just blends in. It may require that of scrolling on that of a mobile device or on that of on our desktop. There may be no click to call functionality. I'll explain what that means in just a moment. And what happens as a result? Users or visitors or prospects, they give up and they go to our competitors, and that's not what we want. If we take into consideration a reality, and look, I realize some of us are B2B exclusively, whether we're serving the channel or whether we have commercial end user customers that we're serving along with that of the resi. So this may not be the case across, for some segment of the group that's with us today. But I will tell you what, we as a company, we are more about mobile first because it is critical, and it's not just from the user standpoint. These are from like Google and the answer engines. It's very critical for us to make sure that we are doing things on a mobile first. And what's happening with that of this mobile reality is perhaps because remember, time is our worst challenge. And when I need your help now. And if not, I'm going to one of your competitors. And here's the thing, one of your prospects, they may be sitting in a parking lot in between meetings, maybe at home after work, browsing on the couch, maybe standing in front of a building that needs, in front of one of their buildings that needs cameras. And look, if they're not able to tap to call within that of just a couple of seconds, they're going to leave and go to one of your competitors. Now, in terms of our fix, whereas we're talking about before and after, we want to transition from the before to the after. And what we mean by this after is we want to make sure that your phone number is in the header. And when we say the header, I'm talking about the very top of your website. And by the way, it needs to be on every single page. So it's in the actual header. The technical phrase for this is it needs to be within your header template throughout every single page of your website. And ideally, the pixels, it's got to be larger. I'm not saying it has to be 16 or larger, but it's got to be, and especially in the mobile device, but it's got to be large. The other thing is, and if you want to take a snapshot of this, you want to make sure that you have the actual code so that the click to call is enabled. And the reason being, and I wrote about this, I think it was either last month or the upcoming month in Security Business Magazine. I talk about this more in detail, but you want to make sure that you are able to tap and then click to call to verify that, as opposed to making them work, because you don't want them to have to dial the number. As silly as that sounds, we want to remove friction. The key here is even with some of these little subtle things, and I think many of us that are here, we don't have these issues, but if any of us do have these issues, this could have an increase of 20% in that of phone calls, plus. So in terms of just a little mini case study here that I'll spend just, a minute or so walking through this. So believe it or not, there was a group that had their phone number in the footer. And it's like, I know probably all of us may be shaking our head. It's like, how is that possible? On the average, they would be generating that of 800, approximately 800 visitors a month. And generally speaking, in some months it was perhaps 8 to 10, and some were 12 to 14. But on the average, they were generating about 12 calls per month. And if you look at that, that's a 1.5% call rate from that of the 800 visitors, which is clearly there's room for improvement. And then after, when we move this and change all these things with the same amount of traffic, the calls increase from about, on the average, 12 to 20, which is a 2.5 increase rate. And the result of this is a 67% increase in calls. And this is even before that of the ad spend, because these are some of the quick fixes and things in that regard. So I will say this before I move on. Remember, tiny hinges, and I know my team laughs at me when I have these silly analogies, but remember, tiny hinges swing big doors. Yes, there are big things that need to change, but it's all about focusing on these fundamentals and things in that regard. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because I want to make sure that we have a tremendous amount of things. Oh, by the way, make sure you stick around to the end, because we have two resources that we'll be sharing with you. And this is going to be that of a 60-second website audit checklist. It's going to be in much more detail, as well as the website conversion fix blueprint. So we've got a multi-page doc. So those two resources, we're going to be giving those away. You don't have to fill in your information. We'll have the QR code scan and things in that regard. So next is that of the clarity test. So remember, I've mentioned the fact that we've got the attention span that's less than that of a goldfish. And keep in mind, what is important to me, and when I say me, I don't mean me directly, but meaning me, look at me being your prospect. And maybe I'm prospect A, and then look at me being prospect B. And perhaps let's just say that we're both commercial end user customers. And let's say, prospect A happens to be in healthcare, and prospect B happens to be in, let's just say, manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, distribution, etc. Even if the solutions that we're deploying are similar or the same, you've got to be speaking to us differently. And that's what we're going to talk about here in terms of the clarity test. But it's not even just that, it's also the geographic here. So here's a little bit of a confusion trap. If we're being vague or too overly general, because, like, for example, I happen to be in Los Angeles, and I know, once again, we're all throughout the country here. Southern California is a huge market. It's like 200 plus miles, from a little north of us to all the way south of us. And if we just say we're serving Southern California, now mind you, if we do in fact serve Southern California across a couple of branches, well, that would be different. But if we're a single location, we don't want to be that vague. We don't necessarily want to just state that we're grading the greater this. We want to make it very clear. We don't want to just list that of the groups that we're working with, because what happens is our prospects, remember, attention span that's less than a goldfish, they don't know if we serve them geographically. And as quickly as they came, they can leave just as fast. The other thing is, let's talk about commercial versus resi. If we are exclusively serving commercial, or if we're serving exclusively resi, or if we're doing both, we look at that from the commercial perspective. If we look at that from the commercial perspective, let's see here. Yes, so Susan asked, am I able to send a PDF of this presentation to your email? I was on the phone. Yes, I'll work with Isabella, Susan, to get you two things. By the way, I think everyone knows this, but today's session is being recorded. So actually, Susan, better yet, you'll get a replay of today's entire session. So you'll be able to hear all the beginning of this as well. So thank you very much. But yeah, Susan, if you'd like, we can work together on, and you're not interrupting at all. I will say this, team, this is meant to be interactive. So I've got a lot to share, but I want to make sure that I'm covering things that are important to you. So, like, feel free to interject in the Q&A or in the chat at any time, and I'd be happy to address that as quickly as possible. Okay, so getting back to that of the commercial prospects, and some of these things are obvious, but I've got to say them anyways. And I know we don't have a lot of time for me to go off into tangents, but I tell you this, do not take for granted things that all of us as industry professionals take as being obvious or straightforward. Remember, our end user customers, they look up to us as being that of the security liaisons. And once again, that's regardless as to whether we're on the vendor side or on the actual channel side. Do we serve, do we serve your specific city or region? Do you have the experience? Because remember, I talked about healthcare versus that of logistics. Remember, it's like I am I want to make sure that you have solutions that are targeted that can meet my needs. Can you solve my problems? Perhaps are you licensed and insured for that of the commercial work and things in that regard? Once again, it goes without saying that yes, we are, but we need to make sure that we're being crystal clear about that. From the Resi perspective, do you serve my geography, my neighborhood? Do you do Resi or are you strictly commercial? What's your response time? Are you local, national? I mean, there's a number of other things as well, but I want you to make sure you're thinking about these low-hanging fruit and take these things into consideration. And look, I know some of you are going to say, well, wait a minute, Dave, with what I'm talking about with the jargon problem. Look, all of us here perhaps may know what UL, what NICET, what ONVIF are, but some of our customers don't. Now, mind you, when it comes to UL or NICET and ONVIF specifically, some of your end user customers may be expecting that. But here's the key. The key here is to explain what these are. Don't just list them. Explain what they are, because some of these are going to be about compliance dependent upon what end user vertical market you're in. Some of these, obviously with fire, there's a lot of things that are compliance, things in this regard. So we want to make sure that we're explaining, communicating what these things are. And by the way, this list can go on and on, because we want to transition those to actual benefits in terms of that regard. So and I'll give you a couple of examples. So when we talk about like the before, like vague, it's like, okay, we do security systems for your business, or we served Southern California since 1995. But if you see here and you contrast that with some of these examples of the after, is like commercial security systems in Orange County. Now there's Orange County in Florida and Orange County where I'm based in Los Angeles. But the key here is Orange County is a specific county here in Los Angeles. And these are cities within that of Orange County. So it's like I'm serving Irvine, Costa Mesa, Newport Beach, and surrounding areas. Because once again, if you're an end user in those areas, it's going to be very evident that you're local. And keep in mind, we have a tremendous amount of data and insights. These things that I'm sharing is not theory. This is based off of what my team shares with us is working best. And I know that I'm using specific areas here in Southern California, but we're sprinkled throughout the entire country. Now, let's use another example here. Video surveillance and access control for warehouses and distribution centers. So like, for example, if a warehouse or a distribution center, because let's say that's one of the primary areas that you service, or primary end user vertical markets that you service, if you were known, liked, and trusted as the go-to resource in your geographic market for warehouse and distribution centers with regards to video surveillance and access control, guess who's, that's going to put you in a position whereas it's not a race to the bottom in terms of price. It'll put you in a great position to be able to be the best known group for that of your target market. So I'm going to skip through that of some of these things here. Feel free to take some snapshots of this because I've got a lot more stuff to cover, and I want to make sure we get to any questions that are had. And I also want to make sure that while we're on time, getting you to the resources. So I'm going to ask. Actually, I guess I didn't lie, but I may ask you to pull out your phones here in just a moment. So this is something that's really important. Keep in mind, and I know I've said this a number of times, I think this will be one of the last times I say this, being that we have the attention span that's less than a goldfish. One of the things that Google penalizes us for, and also one of the things that users penalize us for, is if your website takes a long time to load. But it's not just that, there's a number of other factors that come into place here. And keep in mind, so Google has a tool, and if you want to take a snapshot of this, feel free to take a snapshot of this. We're going to actually go live onto this. By the way, if anyone is interested in, and feel free to not volunteer yourself, but if anyone's interested in open to sending me in the chat your website, we'll do a live demo with that of your website, with that of Google page. So what it is it's a free diagnostic tool that provides you with that of insights on that of your website. And specifically what it does is it's going to measure your mobile performance. So like your when someone's accessing your website on mobile or on that of desktop, as well as it's going to provide specific issues that are slowing down your website. And it's going to provide you with the exact fixes to help implement. And by the way, it takes literally just seconds to actually run. Now, some of these things are going to be a little, how do I say this, technical in nature in terms of some of these things, but these are things that you can take to like your webmaster, the group that does your website, and they can help fix these things in that regard. So once again, you don't have to, because I know probably someone does not want to necessarily share or showcase how there are challenges within that of their site, but okay. So I will, I have another example that I'll just share here with us in just a sec. Let me just scoot this over really quick. So this is once again, this is the result of Page Insights. So this is ABC based in the New Orleans market, and we take into consideration and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but when you go here and you the previous screen, you just add your website to this within a 45 seconds, it will provide you with this report for desktop and mobile. So first of all, there's 4 sections here. So it's talking about performance, accessibility, best practices, and SEO. So performance, this is like how quickly does it load and things in that regard. So some of these things are going to be a little technical, so don't worry about the actual technical details, but keep in mind, green is a good thing. The orange/yellow is okay. And then obviously we don't want to be in the red section, which is going to be 0 to 49 to each of these things. So this is basically, without me getting super detailed and technical with this, is how quickly things ping and how quickly things load. And it's actually even shows screenshots and things in that regard. Look, there's always opportunities for improvement. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's like you put forth hours of work for something that's going to have like a 0.5% marginal increase. So, we tend to always focus on low-hanging fruit type opportunities. Whereas accessibility, this is going to be various things from that of how your website is accessible and things in that regard. Best practices, these are going to be some of the technical best practices, and then that of, scroll back up to the top, and then that of the SEO, some of the SEO best practices and things in that regard. So very structured data, things in that regard. And then there's details in terms of from the mobile perspective as well. So you'll see, you can hover back and forth and see what is that these numbers are. So what I'd like for you to do is to make sure that you take that, how do I say this? Take that URL, and that'll be some of the homework, but we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But in terms of, and I do want to just cover a quick recap of this, though. This is important, is we want to make sure that it's very evident as to the exact service area that you're focused on. We want to make sure we have a clear headline. And this, we want to be as specific as possible. It's like, what do we do and who, where do we serve? Translate those jargon into benefits and make sure that we have, this is really important, not just messaging, but various sections. And as we do this, this will help to increase that of leads. Okay, so next. So in terms of this, we want to make sure that we are ideally above 70 for each of these things. You don't necessarily have to be at 100 for these things, but you want to definitely be at the very least, at least 70 or greater for that of like what we just saw. Okay, so let's talk about like the trust test now for just a couple of minutes. So here's the challenge in terms of a credibility gap, is we have perhaps no, there's stock photos or it's just generic security guards. We don't have testimonials or reviews that are visible. We're not referencing. And by the way, for licenses in most, if not all states, it is a requirement to have your license. But it's not just that. You want that from the credibility standpoint, things in that regard. We don't have like, because look, you're not showing proof of your experience and your expertise and the fact that you're from the community for the community. Or perhaps we have just a generic claim, because anyone can say I'm the best of this and or what have you. And as a result, prospects, if they don't know you, they don't like you, they don't trust you yet, they don't know as to whether you're a viable candidate for them. That's why these things are really important. So here's some examples. If you want to take a snapshot of this, feel free. But this is some of the trust elements, and the list goes a lot longer than this. But some of the trust elements that work is we can make sure that we have reviews or testimonials ideally with real names, with clients, things in that regard. The number of years that you've been in business, so like protecting your specific area, let's just say since 98 or 68 or 69, I should rather say, in the case of our good friends at NAPCO. Some of the industry certifications, like any of the associations that we are part of, if we happen to work with a Five Diamond, monitoring center, we can reference these kinds of things. If we're in fire, whether it's NICE, some of the various licensures and things in that regard. And whereas perhaps I may not be a huge advocate of BBB, if you are a member of BBB or you've got a good rating there, you want to reference that with permission, of course, but you want to reference that of your client logos. And that's, of course, if we're doing any commercial end user stuff, we want to reference that of your Google Business Profile or Yelp. We want to reference because perhaps some of us do not read reviews and things in that regard, but many end users, they in fact base their what they're going to be doing based on that of the reviews and other trust signals and things in that regard. So like, being licensed, bonded, insurance, all of those kinds of things. Even if these things are a given, referencing these are very important. And let's just say, for example, if you've got 500 installations that you've done over the years, 1,000, 10,000, serving over 100,000 customers, you want to reference that. So keep these things in mind. So look, if you want to just look at a quick example, and I'll zip through this really quickly. Contrast that of these, let's say, having stock photos versus real photos. It's a huge difference. Not having any home testimonials to having, even if it's as little as 1 to 2 or 3 or 4 on the homepage. All of your certifications are only in the footer, if even that at all, versus having them, near a quote button. Because remember, when you get to that quote button, which we're going to talk about that in just a moment, this is the time where you want to show social proof that you are a trusted group that can get things done right the first time. Or generic, we're the best versus, let's say, since 2021, we've generated 500 plus installs and growing. No social proof to having that of a Google star rating. And keep in mind, as we do these kinds of things, it helps to increase that of the conversion rate. So let's talk just for a moment about like a week, like an example of a weak testimonial. It's like, great service, highly recommend. And look, something is better than nothing. But ideally, it's like this to me seems like it's rehearsed or what have you. It's not providing any depth or detail. But if you take a look at like this type of example as an example, this is an example, and I'm going to read this. Like after 3 break-ins in 6 months, we brought in XYZ company to upgrade our warehouse surveillance. They haven't had a single incident since the install. Their response time is incredible, and the system's easy to use. Now, if you get into the mindset, now imagine if you are a prospect in the logistics, warehousing, distribution, in the area where this particular security company is, if you take into consideration all these pain points, all of these benefits, this is something that's very different. It's like this, you're going to be more inclined to wanting to work with a group that's going to have these types of reviews. So this is where it comes into actually coaching them and things in that regard to have a little bit more depth. So I'm going to skip through this, but if you want to take a quick snapshot, I'm going to skip through this. So let's talk just for a minute about the friction test. How easy is it to convert? And I will say there are many groups that I've come across that are guilty of this. So here's the challenge from the form field perspective is having too many form fields. And not everyone, but in many cases, I've seen groups, and I'm not talking about it for existing customers when we're talking about for service. I'm talking about for new prospects. A typical security company potentially may be asking for a name, email, phone, address, city, state, zip, property type. What's the square footage, current system, budget, timeline. How did you hear about us? That's 13 fields. 13 fields. And what's the result? Nearly 100% abandonment rate. I will tell you what, I know that this data is really helpful and really useful, but we want to not have form field overkill here. There's a study by HubSpot that measured that of form fields versus that of conversion rates. And the result of this is forms that had 3 fields or less had the highest conversion rate. Ones that had 4 fields had a 50% drop in completion versus the 3 fields. And 11 fields or more only completed at a fifth as often. So, and I think even though it states this in that of the HubSpot study, I think it's important to capture that of the phone number so your sales team can reach out them right away. But remember, these are things you can always do split test with. You can run it without the phone number being required for a couple of weeks and see as to how that makes a difference, dependent upon how you, But just keep these things in mind. The takeaway from this is every additional field that you add, it costs you leads. And I'm not insinuating for you just to ask for the name and email address because we're not selling information, we're selling a service or solution. And what I will say here is a simplified form would be as little as 3 to 4 fields, the name, email address, and phone number, and then perhaps the company if applicable. And what we're doing here is when you discuss with them, you can get all that other basic information. Now, look, if you have the problem, which I think is going to be few and far between, of too many leads that are coming in, and you need to filter them because you don't have enough time to react to all the leads you have, well, then perhaps that's a different, but I don't think that there's many of us that have that type of challenge. So simplify that of your form fields to increase that of the conversion rate. So I'm going to actually skip through here just a little because I think we're a little behind schedule and I see a question just came. Okay, so what do you do about AI or B2B sales using your prospect form from Eric? So I don't know if I'm understanding your question correctly. What do you do about AI or B2B sales using your prospect? Can you, Eric, explain your question a little more so if you wouldn't mind, and then I'll address that because I don't want to, because there are bots that are, I'm not sure if I don't think you're talking about this, but there are bots that fill out forms, and this is where like the captchas and making sure you're using the latest and greatest with that so that you're not having bots. But I think that you're asking something different. So if you can re-specify your question, Eric, and then I'll address that, I'd appreciate that. So from the mobile perspective, some mobile friction issues are perhaps the form fields are too small to tap accurately. The text may be too small to read. And this is why, once again, we look at things as being mobile first. Perhaps it's not mobile keyboard optimized. The page doesn't fit in the screen. It requires a pinch and zoom. Like these things are a given. Like your customers are expecting this. Perhaps like some buttons are overlapping or they're unreachable. And remember, for many of us, not for all of us, but for many of us, 79 or a huge percentage of visitors are coming on that of mobile. And if your website is not optimized for mobile, you're going to be losing those leads. And it's also going to tarnish that of your reputation as well. So I'm going to keep moving forward here. So in terms of that of the decision test, let's see here. Okay, so Eric says, I get a lot of form responses that aren't from potential customers, but rather businesses trying to sell some sort of, believe it or not, on occasion, Eric, I receive that not just through the website, but also through my LinkedIn as well. So what I would say, Eric, and I'm happy to have an offline conversation about this in more detail. But what you want to do is, because it's my team that knows the exact specifics of this, but there are the latest types of various captchas and things that are filtering through this because there are some bots and things that happens with. So I'm happy for us to talk about that a little bit more offline. But you want to make sure that you're utilizing the latest in captchas and things in that regard. And keep in mind, these things need to be updated frequently because these bots and these third-party tools are getting smarter and smarter with that. So, but thank you. I appreciate your question, Eric. Okay, so let's talk about the submit button. So what I'm talking about is on the call to action, like on that of, let's say, unlike that of a form, perhaps we have like a weak CTA. So this is the actual button where you physically click to submit. In many cases, it says submit, or it says contact us, or send, or even learn more. So the problem is these aren't really action oriented, and they do not tell that of the user, the website user, as to what happens next. I'm going to tell you, it's generic and it's boring. And there's data that supports that this has a decrease in that of conversions. Now, let's talk about some strong examples of action-oriented CTAs. So get my free security assessment, schedule my consultation, call for a free quote now, request my free audit, start protecting my business, or start protecting my home as an example. And why is it that these work? And not to get too much into psychology here, but there's a verb that's action-oriented that's first. It's specific about what happens next, and it's using first person, because remember, it's they're reading this, and it's all about them, and it creates urgency without that of adding pressure. There is a demonstrable increase in form submissions when you do these types of things. Now let's talk about just the design or the colors. So we don't want to have buttons or colors that are blending in. You want to make sure that you have contrast against that of your site color so that your eyes naturally gravitate towards them. And keep in mind, take into consideration your color scheme. But generally speaking, red is going to be the highest performing in most tests. Orange will be the second best. Green will be shortly thereafter, and then blue and black and gray. But keep in mind, like the blue and black and gray, those things are going to, now mind you, there's exceptions to the rule because depending upon what the primary colors are of the website is going to determine that. But you want to make sure, once again, your buttons have the colors are standing out. It's like, for example, you look at here where we are, you've got a blue background with white text. It's easy to read it, and your eyes are naturally gravitating towards that. So in terms of, keep in mind, you want to, we have users that come to the website that may want to just, they prefer to make a phone call. Some prefer to make a text. Some prefer to fill out a form. Some prefer to engage with that of like a live chat or perhaps even email. And the reason why this works is because your customers, your prospects, they're all different. Perhaps it's maybe in the middle of the night. Perhaps it's in the middle of the day. They expect to speak with someone. My point with this is you want to make sure that you're removing the friction, having all of these options available. So keep these things in mind. Now, okay, good. So the good news is we have just a few more minutes. Okay, so let's talk about some wrap up and resources here. So in terms of the 60-second conversion journey, this is the complete framework. And by the way, these resources that I'm going to share here in just a couple of minutes are going to be going through this in great detail because we have very limited time. So some of these things I was not able to get into too much detail. But from the visibility standpoint, make sure that your phone number is visible and that it's able to be clicked to be called. Next, clarity. Is it clear who you serve? Is there any, if there's any jargon, is it translated well? Who do you serve and geographically where you serve? From the trust perspective, are there reviews or testimonials? Is there certifications? Is there that social proof? From the friction perspective, are the forms simple? Is it easy to find what you're looking for? I know we didn't discuss this in great detail today, but keep in mind, you want to have your navigation very simple and very easy so that if I am a residential end user versus that of, let's say, a commercial end user that's in the warehousing, we want to have sections of that area that are specifically geared towards me. There's that social proof. There's images. You're explaining to me, first of all, locally in the market, as you're demonstrating that you understand the pains and the challenges that I serve and why I would be needing the solutions that we offer, things in that regard. Also, is the website fast? Is it mobile optimized? And then from the decision-making standpoint, is the CTA, are the call to actions, are they action-oriented so that you're speaking directly to me, number one? Number two, are there multiple paths? Because you're able to make sure that the users are able to find, once again, they can communicate with you on their terms in the ways that are important to them. Look, remember, literally every second counts. Tick tock, tick tock. It counts immensely, and every element matters. Each and every single one, remember, all these are like a force multiplier together. So specifically, these resources are going to be the actual audit checklist in great detail. And then, so there's going to be 10 yes or no questions. You'll be able to score your website and then identify your conversion gaps. And then number two, which is a much more in-depth, is the actual website conversion fix blueprint. So these are going to be some of the high impact fixes, things that you want to implement first, some of the medium, as well as the step-by-step implementation guides. And then you can share this directly, with that of your web dev team. And here is the QR code for that. So I'll leave this up for just a sec. And as we're wrapping up here over these next few minutes, are there any burning questions that I can address that I have not addressed already? And I'll leave this up here just for another sec. And as I mentioned, you're not able to, it's not gated content. So meaning you'll be able to download these things directly from this. Okay. I'm going to leave this up for another 5 seconds. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay. So let's talk about these next 7 days. What is our action plan? So number one is make sure that you use these resources and run that 60-second audit on your website. Make sure you score yourself. And by the way, I'd love for you to share these insights with me to see as to where you're scoring and things in that regard. Also, make sure that you're running the PageSpeed Insight test as well. And then pick one thing to fix and implement it or schedule to do it. Look, for many of us, it may be the phone number visibility, maybe one of the other things that were discussed, but make sure that you're giving that blueprint to that of your web development team. And look, and this is just because one of the challenges that we all have is time. So we're not going to be able to fix everything at one time. So just focus on one thing, make a plan, and start executing upon all these. But if you ideally fix at least just one thing this week, it will take us in steps in the right direction. So in terms of, I want to leave us with like a takeaway, and then to give a thanks again, and then we'll talk about our next webinar is because of the fact that we have the attention span that's less than that of a goldfish. Keep in mind, we've got less than 60 seconds to convert a visitor and for them to leave. And remember, any confused visitor, and this is, by the way, not just on our website, this is during the sales process as well. A confused prospect is one that's not going to be buying from you. And what happens is that's a win for your competitor. We don't want these things. We want to keep all these prospects for ours and not for that of our competitors. So a big thank you once again to each and every single one of you that are watching this live and that will be watching this on demand. I also want to give a big thanks to that of NAPCO and to that of Recognize. And please please let them know you appreciate them at ISC West. And then in terms of our next webinar, we're going to be doing a deep dive on local search engine optimization for that of security dominance. And this is going to take place before ISC West. So we've got one more webinar before we get together at ISC West. It's going to take place on March 19th from 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I'd love for you, since you're here live, why don't you register right now? We'll leave this up for just another few seconds. And I know we may have time for one or two questions, but I know it's Friday and some of you are on the East Coast, and I know you've got a lot of stuff. Let's see here. Okay, so Mark, you sent this to everyone, so I'm going to reference you by name. So thank you, Mark, for your question. Our webpage is security systems only. When I get Fire licensed, do you recommend creating a separate company, Fire webpage, or would I just be competing with myself? I would think it would be better to have two separate websites. So, Mark, I think that I'd like to have, I'm going to answer you right now, but I'd prefer to have a more, because I have a number of questions for you to answer this. I would recommend, without having a deep dive discussion with you, because this is a really good question, because like, for example, perhaps maybe you do security, but then you also do managed services or IT things in this regard. So what I would say is it is very customary for fire companies to offer security services and for security companies to offer fire. I would recommend for you to combine them all under one brand. And the reason being is we want to build your brand locally in your markets, and you want to be known, liked, and trusted as the go-to resource in terms of fire, life safety, and security. So I would highly recommend for you to do this under but what I would recommend is to have dedicated sections to all the things that you do fire. And that's why I'm not going to get too much in the weeds here. But let's say I would imagine that you're going to be doing new fire systems, you're going to be doing takeovers, you'll be doing inspections, you'll be doing fire alarm monitoring, and you'll be doing like POTS replacements or communicators, things in this regard. Perhaps you may be doing sprinklers, probably not, but you may be doing like the kitchen hood stuff, and other related fire and life safety type things like maybe emergency notification, etc. You want to have individual unique pages for each of those, because once again, the key here is to get someone in the front door. And then as you get them in the front door, then you're layering services over time. The other thing is with your existing customers, not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but like in email, in social media, you want to make this big announcement about the fact that you offer these types of solutions, because you probably have, I don't recall how many years you've been in business, Mark, but perhaps, you may you may have customers that you've had or end user customers for 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years, and okay, thank you, 10 years. So you've got a big track record, and you want to make sure that you're layering services with them in that regard. So I'd be happy to have a quick conversation with you, prior to ISC West, or we can spend a few minutes together in Vegas if you're going to be there. And I'd be happy to, we can dig a little deeper into this to see as to whether it would make sense to create a second brand. But generally speaking, that's going to be the case. So, we may have time for one more question. Otherwise, we can get things wrapped up. But really, really, you're very welcome, Mark. And once again, very, very appreciative of everyone, of everyone being here. And as we wrap up, really look forward to seeing everyone at ISC West. Appreciate everyone being here live. Thank you for everyone that's RSVP'd already for that of our next webinar. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. And until next time, make it a great day. Thank you.